The Legend of the Deltarune. It's shaping up to be huge, so I can't help but say it all woo. It's really a piece of art in the way it... Hey, what you doing over there?
Oh, I'm just typing my preemptive counter argument about how you're wrong about the knight and the significance of image underscore friend.
Oh, okay. I mean, I get that the lore and story might be why many of us love Deltarune, but wouldn't it be nice to just look at it like a video game? It's not finished yet, so how do you feel about analyzing its gameplay, rather than just talk about it like some big puzzle just waiting to be solved?
I'm sorry, I have to go off script. You want people to take this seriously,
I
right?
mean, yeah, more or less.
Oh, okay, right. And parodying one of the most disingenuous video essays sounded like a good idea.
Hey, hold on, dude. You're me. I made this whole thing. I voice both of us.
Wait, so am I supposed to be the stand-in for the entire fandom? A straw man? How is it even possible to talk about Deltarune without mentioning story and lore?
It's
It's
not.
not. So, what is this? Tell us how you think the audience ought to feel about all of this
Well,
right now.
wait, no. Hello, I represent Sqoya. They said I could share their vision with you. You are them, representing their insecurities surrounding the reception of this theory. You also are them, the part of themselves they take too seriously. They both are me. This is an analysis of Deltarune with an agenda. I have a lot of uncertainty surrounding the future of the story, while being very certain about the future of its gameplay. Those two things are fundamentally interlinked.
But it would be impossible to focus on these dual elements without
Without
first
first
drawing
drawing
a
a
separation.
separation.
Wow. I get it.
Come on, dude. Truce.
Truce.
Get in
Oh.
here. I'm glad we're working together on something, starting this project here in September of 2025. I know. I'm so excited to explore this Astral Wolf idea. Who knows how far it will take me? Probably no more than 30 minutes, right? I guess we'll never know unless we get started here in September of 2025. So, what are we doing here? What is Astral Wolf theory? Fundamentally, it is my perspective on Deltarune, not the answer to every question or my assessment of the game's quality. And it is not a recounting of the game's events, interspliced with my takes. It is my manifesto. My agenda is to impart a vision of an event. I can't simply tell you what it is that I can see. We have to do our best to connect to each other, fundamentally trapped within this medium. It's almost been 11 years since I first played Undertale. I have only ever made one thing for the community in all that time. I have so much I want to show you, in the limited ways that are possible. You have never heard from me directly before, so we may need to take some shortcuts. I'm expecting you all to be familiar with Undertale and Deltarune. Not just aware, but intricately familiar with these characters, these stories, and the spaces surrounding them. This should not be your first rodeo, so to speak. We all have our own experiences with this game, but this is my Deltarune, and if we can find each other, between the lines, I'm sure we'll discover some wonderful connections, so long as you accept everything that happens from this point forward. Look, any other theorist, analyzer, or retrospector can tell you what Deltarune is about, where they think it's heading, what they think is going on. But I think we miss something pretty important when we hyper-focus on the story and lore. The gameplay. It's the structure driving us forward, the unspoken scaffolding for the story that makes it all the more fun to engage with. There's a crazy amount of text in this game, but you really need to take control for yourself to appreciate everything it has to offer. Hearing about it or watching it doesn't do it justice. It's a turn-based RPG, sure, but the sheer variety in its gameplay contributes massively to the overall package. I think what got me into Undertale initially was how similar the game feel was to the turn-based RPGs I grew up with, like Mario and Luigi or Paper Mario, where you retain agency when being attacked. You can parry attacks rather than just stat grinding, building, and tanking damage. You can execute some well-timed action commands for extra hits. In Undertale, you can dodge your enemy's attacks like a bullet hell. But in Deltarune, we find action commands not just in timing our attacks, but in Kris's act menu. When Susie lines them up to loosen wires, when you mash left and right to shake up Althazard, or shuffle a blocks or shoot at a shadow guy. It's so much more than Undertale ever allowed for. Putting our heroes on the screen alongside enemies allows for everything to feel a lot more grounded. Frequently, the gang's acts will interact with enemy sprites themselves, whereas enemies are universally targeting the soul. But it just works so well, and it pulls you right into the world. I still remember having my mind blown in Chapter 1 when the bullet hell gameplay had made its way into the overworld. Traversing those purple cliffs and having those spades launched at you was a distinctive moment. To me, the most obvious changes in Undertale's formula are in the combat. Enemies are no longer randomly encountered. They're visible and can often be completely dodged. Combat is where Deltarune has been the most experimental, and its identity as the game being made after Undertale still shines through the most. Oftentimes, you can see how concepts in Deltarune originally found their footing in Undertale. Maybe, by seeing how Deltarune has played with those ideas, we can make predictions on what else we might see in Deltarune. The game is not finished yet, but I can see some very, very clear patterns emerging, especially by contrasting these games against each other. I want to talk primarily about gameplay. I look for games that are fun to control, where mere interaction itself feels responsive and rewarding. I think that's why I enjoy the bullet hell mechanic. It keeps you engaged, and your reactions sharp. The game feels tailored for and tethered to you as the player. The shape your enemy's bullets take feel lively and energetic, especially considering the grazing and TP mechanic. In contrast to the speed and reactivity necessary for defense, the offensive phase's UI is designed to give you pause. The act menu is the second option, because picking it should always feel like a conscious choice. Each enemy has unique interactions, so you really won't be able to mash your way through encounters in order to make friends. You've got to slow down out of necessity. It feels great, makes sense, and everything comes together with the TP mechanic really well to make something paced perfectly, keeping you engaged, with plenty of agency, all the time. Toby Fox just gets it. He's amazing at explaining what makes a game tick. I very much am not. I'm good at playing them, and I have a breadth of experience considering my age. I'm going to do my best with everything I've learned to deliver what I hope will expand the perspectives going around in the theory community. Despite growing up in the early 2000s, playing NES games at my grandma's house are my earliest gaming memories. When my older cousin showed me how to get the warp whistle in Super Mario Bros. 3, he became the coolest person of all time. I don't want to give you this false impression that I'm an expert on these things. I just love playing video games, and I love thinking about them. A lot of Toby's knowledge of game design was formed by his own love for other games, and his desire to keep them going. We all know about his Earthbound ROM hacking, but Deltarune is showing his other inspirations more than ever. It's dripping in homages and references to pop culture and gaming landmarks.
You broke my grill? You broke my grill?
Easing in here, we have The Simpsons. Quite a few references from this one franchise, considering the sheer breadth of homages within Deltarune. In Chapter 1, Alvis refers to the in-universe parody and the extensive amount of time it's been on the air. In the episode where Homer leads the plant in a labor strike, Mr. Burns' typewriter monkeys produce the gem,
"It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times,"
which is derived from the opening A Tale of Two Cities. The book was already referenced once before in Chapter 2's classroom scene, but this reference is very specifically Simpsons. We've also got the scene where Lisa is teaching Maggie about complex geometry, specifically
dodecahedron.
This is funny in concept regardless, but it may have inspired this poster in Boreal's classroom. Gerson makes a pretty clear-cut SpongeBob reference while writing his letter in his study, but I don't want to get too deep into the references to yellow cartoon characters. There's plenty of ground to cover in the gaming department. For example, Tenna's look is inspired by the pre-rendered 3D sprites from Donkey Kong Country, a groundbreaking title at that time. On top of that, the Spade King's voice lines are sampled from the Kremling's grunts from the same game. And we're barely getting started. You can't miss it. Deltarune is drenched in retro gaming DNA. In Chapter 1, we hear about Super Smashing Fighters, and the green lizard with its green spotted eggs. Later in the game, Alvin tells us of Kris's great sin of dropping said lizard on purpose. It's pretty clearly a reference to Super Mario World. It's a nice little moment of characterization, relating something familiar to the audience in order to communicate an idea about Kris without outright spelling it out for us. But these references reach beyond parodies and cheeky Easter eggs. They reach into the gameplay, into the way in which Deltarune is experienced and connected to you. Toby's proud of his work, and he's very open about the inspirations that have driven his own creative process. Chapter 2's Punch-Out game was a jaw-drop moment for me. Just straight up a game within a game. Very cool. That one's pretty obvious, But there's also the Spamton fight, which really feels like Galaga. This analog was a whole lot more clear against Mettaton. But now that it's sideways with the gang all on rails, it actually controls a lot more like the plane bits in Super Mario Land, for example. Check out that arm cannon, straight out of Mega Man or Metroid. Whether intentional or not, it made sense that Chapter 2 would draw from existing games for its battles. After all, it was the technology-focused chapter. But when 3 and 4 came along, a few things had me raising my eyebrows. First is Tenna, the CRT that taught Kris to laugh and cry. He introduces himself with a surreal animation, revealing his iconic 3D look. He pitches us his game show, which takes us along a board segment, culminating in a minigame. Kind of like Mario Party? He calls the board The Legend of Tenna. When Susie steals a key from his shop, she's branded a thief, just like in Link's Awakening. If this was lost on you, I'll explain. In Zelda, successfully walking out of this shop with an item will brand you a thief, quite literally. The shopkeeper will use electric powers to kill you upon re-entry, changing your character's name to Thief in the files. Link's Awakening is littered with meta jokes, like the kid who tells you about buttons on your Game Boy, and references to other franchises, like Goombas or Kirby. They played it loose, considering this was a smaller project on more whimsical hardware. But by contrasting these silly little jokes against the provocative and dark story of this otherwise simplistic game, it creates an incredible tone and a world that feels more alive. Spoilers, but eventually we must wake the Windfish, reducing Koholint Island to nothing more than a dream. So, when Susie uses the power croissant to lift up a key, Tenna calls her a thief. In the same way, extremely aware of itself, Deltarune makes these fun little jokes, contrasted against its provocative story, to make the characters feel real, like they're almost a part of the world we live in. Or maybe, we start to feel like we're part of the world they live in. I love Chapter 3 and the Mantle game. Zelda is my favorite gaming franchise out there, and to see it treated with such reverence and love by someone like Toby was a joy. I'm quite familiar with those games, so to play this bizarro ROM hack version of Zelda 1 perfectly integrated into Deltarune was a very dreamlike sequence. Of course, Chapter 3 continues with even more references, like the cooking minigame's general arcadey feel, complete with Donkey Kong sound effects. We have the Guitar Hero performance, and if you've got enough patience after Lancer appears, the annoying dog joins the battle against Rules Card. We've also got the WarioWare microgame attack sequences in Tenna's final battle. And who could forget the Egg Room, a green Game Boy-like island, a World Heritage Site, specially made for non-men like Kris. Chapter 2's homages to gaming were ratcheted up to 11 in Chapter 3. It makes sense, it is TV World after all. But the references don't stop there, they kept coming. In Chapter 4, Jackenstein's fight has some pretty clear theming. Collect treasure in a spooky mansion, shine a light on some ghosts screaming Mamma Mia. If I said there was a little bit of Luigi's Mansion going on here, I wouldn't be crazy, right? But that's not all. You maneuver these little maze-like corridors picking up little pellets, kinda like Pac-Man. This one might be a stretch, but does Jack's silhouette not look like Freddy Fazbear himself for just a brief second? On top of that, Jack has voice lines. Stilted, goofy, sentence-mixed voice lines. In ancient times, video editing software and the iconic Panasonic CDI cutscenes came together to form a primordial ooze, out of which YouTube poop would emerge.
I'm going to die. Help me. Save me.
Amazingly, the evolutionary line remains incredibly strong and adaptable all these years later. In a callback to Undertale, we're able to train under Gerson, who trained Undyne. But Gerson himself is a hammer-wielding turtle, who bounces his shell all around, arcing his weaponry in a familiar way. You can definitely tell Toby is a gamer. The green soul is Dance Dance Revolution, by the way. Hear me out, like, you have arrows flying at you, and you've got to orient to the correct position with good timing. Timing that increases your points as you increase your precision. This timing later becomes literally sound-based. Is this crazy to say? I know it doesn't look much like Dance Dance Revolution, but it's a pretty clear parallel in its gameplay and controls, no? What is crazy is the goddamn Among Us reference from Noelle before any of this happens. Then we, the player, the soul, crawl around in the vent system, and we even cut the power. If we wait around long enough, we hear Susie and Noelle start talking about dragon blazers. with secret evil routes, or the route where you just be nice. It's supposedly not canon, but for what it's worth, her blog confirms that Cat Petters is most likely a parody of Cats, a PC pet-raising game that composes its animals of little spheres. But why do all of this? Just for fun? Toby loves referencing things, it doesn't have to mean anything. Take the Shit Yourself Clown Sticker Pack as Exhibit A. Undertale went to great lengths to both parody existing work while maintaining its own originality. Deltarune, by contrast, seems to delight in references, parodies, and often just direct analogs to existing games. When you play Mother 3, you realize just how unoriginal I am. Toby expressed this in a tongue-in-cheek, self-deprecating manner. The reality is that Toby loves his inspirations. They've instilled within him something strong and motivating enough to push forward with his vision. Deltarune is shaping up to be more than simply Undertale's next step. It's looking to fuse together games from across the medium into something new. If you have a familiarity with any of these other franchises, chances are you'll be endeared towards Deltarune. That's why it's here. That's why anyone makes an homage or a reference in their own artistic works. To increase the level of familiarity you have with the world, simply by invoking what is already known and applying it to something new, to make your existing connection become stronger. These characters grow to be more comfortable around each other through references. Susie flexes her Dragon Blazers 2 knowledge, and Birdly does a complete 180, with a newfound respect for her. Noelle breaks the tension on the study date with Dragon Blazers references, and Susie returns the energy by talking about the severed hand from Blood Crushers. In Chapter 1, Alphys tries to break the ice with Kris by bringing up the Symptoms. It doesn't work all that well for her, but we see she's looking for connection. That's why these references are here, to connect us to the game even further than we already are connected, to increase the familiarity and our ability to integrate into this world. These references are not the entire reason why we love being here, but it is a pretty significant recurrent window dressing that certainly humanizes these complex characters, and it helps us connect to Kris. Let's talk a little bit about those lizards being dropped into pits. Asriel confesses his sin of accidentally losing Yoshi in order to survive. Totally believable. Characterizes him as a tender, sweet little angel. His sibling, Kris, drops the lizard on purpose, and Asriel repents for their sin on Kris's behalf. How does this characterize them? As someone who just enjoys being cruel and pranking people? Sure, I can see that. But let me play this clip for you. Usually, if you want to take this keyhole exit, you've got to backtrack after you find a different secret in a future level, making these blocks appear, allowing access to this narrow passage. But by dropping Yoshi on purpose, you can cut past a pretty significant stretch of the game. This is a common maneuver, and pretty easy to pull off, but it still seems like something Asriel would cry over, abandoning the lizard on purpose. Yes, I know the text specifically says Kris drops Yoshi into pits on purpose, but isn't this little maneuver so Kris-coded? This is where I get delusional, but doesn't this seem like the kind of way December might play the game? And to Kris, makes Des the coolest person they know? Okay, let's pump the brakes. It's so easy to get pulled into the world Deltarune is creating and project yourself onto Kris. I feel this is somewhat by design. Not that we should view Kris as an avatar, but thanks to the game's design, you will slip a little bit in your awareness. Find yourself behaving exactly how you would, rather than remaining fully conscious of Kris's existence as their own person, until they rip you out of their chest and throw you in a cage. It's a fine line to walk, but it's done so fantastically. We feel like we fit into this world, as seen through Kris's eyes. References to our own pop culture grounding this place as real. See, there's this massive thing that majorly contributes to Toby's inspirations, and it's called Homestuck.
The coolest comic on the internet with the coolest fandom.
It would just use existing IP straight up, with no parody. But this endears the reader to the world being built for them. Why would Deltarune want us, as the player, to feel all the more connected to its world? Personally, I'm more interested in how it is connecting us to its world. The relationship between the game and the player. How the game communicates directly and indirectly. And how a player might respond to the game's structure and its guiding hand. We're going to talk a little bit about foreshadowing. Do you remember this Astral Wolf poster? It's been there since Chapter 1. It's a pretty clear parody of Star Fox, seemingly just some flavor text on the classroom wall. But what if I told you that Deltarune has been building towards this Chekhov's gun? What if I told you that Alphys is most likely going to be directly tied to the coming Purple Soul boss fight? And lastly, that the Purple Soul boss is going to be the most technically impressive thing we've seen in the game. This has been in my mind for months. I want to lay everything out for you all as clearly as possible, and I want you all to understand the perspective I am operating under. I'm not looking to make extremely specific story predictions. I'm looking to make practical, gameplay-focused assumptions based on what we know. We can't afford too much speculation, or we'll get lost in the woods and miss the forest for the trees. We'll start with Undertale. What do we know about the Purple Soul fight? We're up against Muffet, who fills up the battle box like a teacup, trapping us along these lines. Bullets come at us every which way. We can move freely left and right, but we more so have to jump across them to change elevation. The box tilts and twists and even gets eaten, giving a little escape sequence. The music isn't all that original. It's another remix of Ghost Fight. It makes sense that the Ghost family, the Blukes, would have related themes, but why does Muffet get that song? Well, a couple of reasons. First, it seems she was hired by Mettaton, one of the Blukes, to kill the human. Second, she's a Kickstarter character, a donation reward for Michelle Chachkowski. Muffet being someone else's OC raises doubts on her returning as a proper boss fight. I'm sure it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. Muffet has already been referenced via the Gold Widow in Chapter 4, the reward received for a maximum donation to the Reflection Pool. It's not like the team is afraid of her. Hell, they weren't afraid of alluding to So Sorry either. I just don't think this is a character Toby's interested in exploring in a deep way here in Deltarune. Toby has openly talked about the game as an opportunity to iterate and improve upon things from Undertale, like the lack of a true Mettaton Neo battle. Here, the Spamton fight inherits so much from Mettaton. It features a little Lukey bit in the soundtrack, and Swatch tells us that the body was likely drawn by Mettaton as well. The Yellow Soul has seen its own evolution. You've got the big shot, sure, but the presentation being sideways allows for much tighter bullet hell, rather than Mettaton's weak reliance on crossbombs, rewinding, and the little umbrella fellas. The Gerson fight is a great iteration on Undyne's battles too, even though she had proper battles in both Geno and Pacifist. Gerson doubles the defensive angles you can take and introduces new bullets like the bouncing shells, and attack patterns that seem to be favored by those with a lot of determination. Okay, so the Purple Soul fight will probably evolve quite a bit from last time, but who will it be tied to? Let's ask ourselves about the Purple Soul. What do we actually know about that human? We've got the cloudy glasses and the notebook. Their phase in the Flowey battle features all sorts of negative words we dodge. Invasive thoughts, self-doubt. These eventually give way to words of affirmation. From the mini-golf game, we can infer the trait of perseverance. Yeah, that's right. In Undertale, there's flavor text associated with your golf performance. It's color-coded in relation to the kids who died before you. The game also refers to the Purple Soul's function as trap mode. When we take the cloudy glasses, the notebook, feeling trapped, and themes of perseverance, alongside overwhelmingly negative self-talk, somebody immediately comes to mind. Alphys. In Undertale, she feels as if she's dug herself into a hole, with both her soul robot project and the amalgamates. She's trapped herself inside, ignoring letters from Asgore and the monster families. She struggles with being authentic and telling the truth quite a lot over the course of the story. We meet her in Hotland, the same place we meet Mettaton and Muffet, but her constant presence felt throughout the Undernet really makes it feel like it's her area, and not theirs. She manipulates the human, making herself out to be the hero. She tasks Mettaton with this gaslighting until he ultimately takes matters into his own hands, in what can only be described as a stunning fit of manic gender euphoria. Alfie's redemption is found in this Fallout, in her story of perseverance, by confessing her love to Undyne and coming clean over the amalgamates. For someone who holds such a significant key in Undertale's story, it's odd she never got a boss fight. However, to me, the Purple Soul has always been tied to her. It's our Hotland boss encounter, hired by Mettaton, who was created by Alphys. They both see shadows changing shape in the darkness. Ultimately, it's a very, very late letter that proves to be the saving grace in the end. again with that theme of perseverance, inviting the reader to see Alphys in a different light. Muffet is the only boss who isn't lined up with the main cast at the end of the pacifist route, and Alphys is the only one in that lineup without a boss fight. When you get to Muffet's boss encounter, it's a totally different vibe from the rest of Hotland. It's just kinda put here, in between it all. It's also one of the few rooms in the area you don't hear from Alphys at all. It always felt a bit strange. I'm not saying that Muffet is a literal representation or stand-in for Alphys. Rather, the two share a symbolic relevance to each other, and that will be an important distinction to make today. I'm convinced that the Purple Soul fight will be rethought and rethemed around Alphys. Still some more points to connect in order to get us over to Deltarune, so let's keep moving. We may have already seen little bits and pieces of Purple Soul concepts in the game, as early as Chapter 2. Look at these teacup rides. The tea allusion to Muffet aside, these cups trap you on a horizontal plane, and you can only rotate left and right as bullets come at you. Functionally, it's very similar to trap mode, but rather than being stuck in a box, the line has wrapped all the way around, becoming 3D. When there's nowhere left to ride, you jump the gap to the next set. The teacups themselves always felt a bit out of place in Chapter 2, right? I mean, there is the Ferris wheel poster, and the festival may have been on the knight's mind when the fountain was created. Or maybe Noelle had brought some unseen tea into the computer lab? There's the shopkeeper who sells the character tea, but it never felt like those cup rides fit within the Cyber City from a visual perspective. It's incredibly unsettling to see them rise up from the dark in Queen's basement. They should not be here, and neither should that thing. The first appearance of Friend. A creepy smile, not dissimilar to the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. Suddenly, the teacups feel spot on for this basement. Following our time in the Card Kingdom, we're now going down alone, following that cat. Getting down to our digital roots and the matrix we are governed by, our green strings of code. Friend being a cat is one of the few Chapter 2 era theories that was totally vindicated, and the teacups were a pretty big piece of that evidence, along with Card Kingdom, until more newsletters arrived. Let's put a hold on Friend discussion for a moment, because there's something else these little cups do. They play with perspective. They put you on a different plane than usual. Bullets swing toward and away from our view, with little shadows cast downwards in order to telegraph their destination, making it easier to dodge. Kind of like how shadows in 3D platformers make it easier to tell where your character will land. It's a very effective pseudo-3D effect. Later on in Chapter 2, we get another great visual, with the city whizzing by as we fight Giga Queen. It's simple, but it works. It's the kind of graphic solution you'd find in Genesis or Super Nintendo games. Chapter 3 features Tenna, a character who is fully 3D modeled and compressed into sprite work. He plays with this 3D motif in his battle, with the scrolling floor. Prior to this, during the Hellboard, he can run a marathon straight at the camera, enlarging as a perspective trick, in a way quite similar to Friend's little cutscene, where it gets closer to the screen by scaling and enlarging its sprite. Again, with Friend, we've got to mention Perspective Test Room. This one is crazy. A big ol' spiral tunnel of orbs, which I believe are taken from the Snowgrave animation. I don't intend to frame this as finding all these little secret breadcrumbs Toby left on purpose, just for us to connect. My perspective is that these are real tests and real experiments that the team is conducting so Toby and the team can make a good game. The story is being released in individual segments, following a particular order, so these concepts are able to evolve across development time. In Chapter 4, we have the climbing towers, and the little circles dotting it, which eloquently illustrate depth and three-dimensionality. This may be the perspective test room come to fruition, but there's one little hang-up, the Tail of Hell, which is also revealed in this chapter. We have a tail that must be followed, which is releasing in segments, and a tail that must not be followed, which is also segmented. Spamton, our little cat puppet salesman with pink and yellow glasses, freedom, heaven, hyperlink blocked, he's got this heart on a chain he can't help but show off, like a big blinking weak spot. I saw someone on Twitter point out the similarity between Spamton's heart attack and Friend's presumed tail. I didn't buy the connection at first, especially considering Spade King has a very similar attack, but that's apparently called the Chain of Hell in the files. I don't think Toby is trying to hide the tail motifs. There was originally a segmented hookshot used on the Legend of Tenna boards, but it's important that the motif be used in fitting scenarios. Spamton used the shadow crystals and saw behind the curtain. He's inextricably tied to Friend. It may be that he is symbolically relevant of things yet to come, especially given all his supposed, albeit deranged, knowledge as to how this world works. Something is telling me that this cat, that is inherently associated with the device, and therefore Gaster, and therefore 666, and therefore Hell, might be related to this tale. Lots of people have theorized that Mike's true identity is Friend. For example, Jongler further ties Friend to the cat's parody from Noelle's blog. You know, that weird cat that makes you lose all your points? The one that supposedly someone else has also seen? Let's check out Kris's web search result room. Everything is incorrect. Just a little off. Not quite what you asked for. And there it is. Jongler's Book of Tricks. In the files, it's referred to as a juggling book. You know, balls, circles. Kris was looking for answers on how to use magic. Kris, the same kid who was rumored to have summoned a demon. What results are pulled from Kris's search? A book about balls, bearing the namesake of the minigame in which Noelle saw Friend. I don't think this book is insignificant. Jongler's Book of Jongling and Other Tricks is not just a little joke. Rather, it truly is the in-universe item that represents Kris's search for Friend using the internet. Like, as in-game evidence to confirm the blog, making it a pretty big smoking gun. Seemingly just a joke or a little reference can return a lot of information about a character. Even if you don't buy the shared friend-citing blog post, Kris is still looking up how to use magic, and they're rumored to have summoned a demon with Caddy. Kris's personalized search algorithm pulled Jongler results for a reason. Okay, so with Noelle's blog describing the cat's creatures as being built out of circles, and the Tale of Hell very clearly being exactly that, all these little perspective experiments and pseudo 3D effects involving circles start to stick out a bit. It really does feel like Toby is experimenting with style. How can he realize 3D graphics within GameMaker? The tools exist, sure, but how can we make them feel at home within Deltarune? Looking back to the 90s, the Super Nintendo's answer to the Genesis's increased power was the Super FX chip. Embedded within the cartridges themselves, it allowed for some advanced graphical capabilities late into the console's life. More simple games like Yoshi's Island took subtle, performance-oriented, stylistic advantage of the chips, while others like Stunt Race FX fully embraced 3D rendered games as the future. The most iconic 3D game of this era would be Star Fox. Groundbreaking, revolutionary. Seeing something like this on a home console, absolutely unreal for like a year or two. Star Fox is an on-rails shooter. You're stuck always moving forward within the confines of the screen, but you can at least speed up and slow down. You also have control over your elevation, allowing you to effectively dodge obstacles as they fly at you. The visuals are quaint and effective. It hosts secrets, alternate routes, and shortcuts to discover. Its final boss, Andros, was a founding member of the Big Floating Head Boss Club. For a franchise that has seemingly gone quiet in recent years, the impact it's had on gaming cannot be understated. It's already impacted Deltarune. Look at Birdley's Dark World appearance. Now, take a look at Hotshot R-Wing pilot Falco Lombardi. If you're at all familiar with Super Smash Bros. Melee, you know that Fox and Falco are considered top tier in the competitive scene, a scene Toby Fox was once heavily involved in. And Mrs. Boom references wave dashing in church, an advanced movement tech, again in relation to Birdley. The Mantle game features Birdley in a pretty significant way, and it seems he'll be at the festival. I can't imagine we'll be totally free of his presence, considering his prominence in the Weird Route. I'm especially interested in seeing how he's implemented in future Weird Route chapters. Maybe he was largely just a testing ground for Noelle's power? Lastly is that poster, the one that is explicitly clarified to be from a video game. There are several motivational quotes from various literature on the wall, but we're only ever allowed to read this one. Try your best, Astral Wolf, even in your darkest hour. It felt cute in Chapter 1, but now that it seems like Deltarune's darkest hour is approaching, I'm seeing it in a different light. Now that we're being warned of Hell's Tail, which must not be followed, which is made up of circles, while experimenting with pseudo 3D using circles, it kind of feels like there's going to be some pseudo 3D gameplay segment that involves a lot of circles, all changing position and perspective. Maybe forming some kind of tail for us to follow, or not follow? Deltarune's prophecy seems to be universal, all-encompassing. Reading is true no matter the route you take. You'll end up at the same place. I feel Star Fox represents this idea perfectly in its gameplay. You're pushed forward, into obstacles, into combat, into the unknown, and all we can do is react as best we can. You always end up at Venom. One name for your finale, right? Poison, certain doom. Beyond that largely symbolic extrapolation, we have even more little Star Fox motifs in the game, as it stands. Throughout TV World and Antenna's battle, we have the Cowboy segment, which may possibly be a little preview into more Purple Soul gameplay, as a sort of trap mode. Curiously, it's an on-rails shooter, because of the train, and the guns. We can move on a grid, our input bound in relation to the central window. When we're dodging, Tenna is shooting at us from the foreground, and into the background. This is similar to the feel of using the targeting view in Star Fox, steering away and then releasing that to settle your reticle. Looking back at Chapter 2, let's think about Spamton as symbolically relevant to Friend. The Muffet Purple Soul teacups take us down into the basement, in the digital roots, and then we begin experiencing an on-rails shooter. Spamton keeps invoking heaven and going beyond, becoming Neo. He's pierced the veil to some extent. He can catch a glimpse of how the world really operates, thanks to either the Shadow Crystal or knowledge gained over the phone, or from Mike. Queen's Basement and the Mantle game seem to represent, or loosely hint at, what may be waiting in the shelter through the Roots connection. To be clear, we're still very much in Plato's cave, watching shadows on the wall, but there is a lot we can do to begin breaking the illusions apart. In the second sanctuary, we can find the Egg Room, connected to the Roots prophecy, along the harmonic with scrambled dialogue about the pointed tail, and the fallen star with rivers of tears that looked like glass. Again, connecting Roots, Friend, and Shadow Crystals. The ominous history Kris has with the shelter might be inferring that it is the place where poor children became lost where the forest would grow. Talking to Alphys in church reveals her divine clairvoyance regarding Susie's new hay-covered house. Alphys suspects what's inside the shelter may be worse than whatever emergency its use would require. Something locked up for the good of everyone outside. Kind of like Jevil, locked away with 3 keys in a strange, mysterious descent. When we enter his circus, I can't help but notice the 3D rendered world revolving in the background, with his 3D scrolling carousel ride, and his ability to clip through reality. I mentioned earlier that enemy sprites are grounded within the world. We can often interact with them by using our axe, whereas enemies universally target the soul. Jevil is not grounded within this dimension in the same way as the other enemies. A 2-dimensional being can only experience reality from that perspective, within that dimension. A 3-dimensional being would be able to blip in and out of the universe as perceived by a 2-dimensional being, that is. Super Paper Mario illustrates this understanding of dimensionality pretty well. When experiencing the 2nd dimension, enemies can see you, but flipping into the 3rd practically makes you non-existent in those enemies' reality. Until you blip back in, when you get back on their level. Pixar's Monsters, Inc. is often used when metaphysicists illustrate how a 3-dimensional being, like a human, might interface with the 4th dimension. A Monsters, Inc. door would only work if it allowed you to travel across dimensions. You'd never feel or see the 4th dimension, only the 3rd. Truly living in and perceiving the 4th dimension would trivialize the 3rd dimension in its entirety. If a 3-dimensional being, like you and me, somehow gained the ability to actually perceive and willfully move within the 4th dimension, as simply as we move through the 3rd, the world, as we know it, would revolve around them. Their view of our reality would become darker, yet darker. To hypothesize about an alternate reality, a different dimensionality, in which none of this matters, doesn't actually mean that nothing matters in our dimensionality. We're all bound by time and stuck together. That's what traps us down here, in the third dimension. Time connects us, unites us, drives us, and ultimately takes us. It's what we do within time as a dimension, with all the other little three-dimensional beings, that brings us all the meaning in the world as we know it, as we will ever know it. We only get one shot at this, as far as we can tell. Just because someone beyond our perception may be observing and influencing the course of our lives, doesn't mean we shouldn't make the most of every moment and live in the now. And as always, thanks for wait a minute. Okay, so if you take the purple soul setup from Undertale, add that Z-axis and vanishing points way off in the distance, and then bring bullets forward from the background into the foreground, scaling them larger to make it seem like they're approaching. You've got a very rudimentary kind of Star Fox gameplay, and an incredibly effective 3D illusion. In the Muffet fight, the only way to dodge vertically was by changing your elevation. Moving left and right kind of matters, but most attack patterns don't really require it. Honestly, trap mode has always felt like the weakest concept. I mean, it's Frogger. Adding that Z-axis feels like the best way to evolve the Purple Soul, and with all these 3D illusions already in the game, it seems kind of obvious. I love the idea that Deltarune raises its visual fidelity as the stakes rise, and we progress further. The closer we get to situations analogous to reality, the more we have to stipulate on. That's a direct quote from the Zelda Sequelitis video.
The more specific you get about situations analogous to reality, the more you have to stipulate on.
When you're trying to sell the illusion of reality, you've got to set up a lot of restrictions, so the illusion doesn't break. That's the give and take. It's the contract you sign when you're chasing more freedom. The Purple Soul hopping across elevation levels would not be accurate to Star Fox, and Game Maker does not have the Super FX chips. These sprites would need to be diligently handmade. For simplicity and visual clarity, I think the distinct elevation levels should be kept. I'd like to imagine 3 lines along the screen. You can be low, high, or in the middle. Bullets would ideally come forward on these 3 planes as well, making it easier to tell where you'll be safe, compared to freeform movement like the Red Soul. I kind of doubt that we'll be dodging and shooting impressively rendered 3D enemies. I'm sure it's possible, but it's much more likely to me that things will be structured out of circles, and primarily dodged. Circles are easiest to build with in layers and scale. The smoke animation comes to mind as one being particularly high fidelity, thanks to its use of circles. And it's what the team has practiced with the most in regards to 3D illusion. I think if this effect is going to look good, it's going to be stylized heavily and narrowly focused. This is why I gravitate towards Friend being particularly relevant. I think its full reveal will be pretty monumental, and I can't think of a more thematic way to do that than by literally going 3D. The more we imitate reality, the more we must simulate stipulations. If there is to be 3D in the game, a presentation inspired by Star Fox would be the most feasible and effective for the medium. I feel that this makes for an impressive, unsettling, reach-through-the-screen moment without being derivative of Undertale. I don't think Kris will slash the screen in the same way as Chara. I don't think our penultimate confrontation will share the Photoshop aesthetic with Flowey. I think something like this ups the stakes and fits with our style perfectly. But sqoya, why would a soul be dodging these obstacles? Why not a ship or some sort of vessel for the characters to ride in? In the control department, it makes no difference. I'm sure there will be some kind of visual solution to make it clear that this is a proper soul mode. Maybe Luke Starwalker pulls up in a Dingwing. It doesn't even need to be a one-for-one replica of Star Fox. It could consist solely of dodging, with the third dimension being enough of a twist in and of itself to represent a proper iteration on the formula. Or maybe Toby will use the mic tech and have us bust out a mouse. Keyboard maneuvering and simultaneous mouse-controlled shooting. Yell into the mic to send out a pulse bomb. Just kidding about that last part. I don't know, there's a lot of soul modes in the game that don't get proper colors. You've got Punch-Out, the Umbrella, the mics, Glow mode. There's no guarantee the Purple Soul proper will ever make an appearance. But I can't ignore all the thematic relevance between the Purple Soul, Alphys, and her poster. In research for this video, I wanted to see if anyone else has come to this conclusion, or even like a vaguely similar concept. To my surprise, there's almost nothing out there on the Purple Soul as it relates to Deltarune. Most theories regarding the Purple Soul are about why it won't be in the game. There are some fan games out there, but this specific idea of the Purple Soul fight being a 3D on-rails shooter inspired by Star Fox's presentation, it's admittedly pretty wild. And look, I get it, just because something looks cool doesn't mean it's true. But I'm telling you, there's more to it than that. Here's how I'd summarize what we have so far. Deltarune seeks to iterate and improve upon Undertale's gameplay. Toby has spoken openly about using Deltarune as an opportunity to do what could not be done in Undertale. Deltarune relies heavily on references and homages in both dialogue and gameplay, constructing a world familiar to our own, endearing us to its characters and world. Of the main cast, Alphys is most heavily associated with the Purple Soul, and she missed out on her own boss fight in Undertale, meaning she may be relevant in the Purple Soul's eventual return. Chapter 2's teacup rides, inexplicably tied to both Muffet and Image Friend, along with many other pseudo 3D experiments and on-rails shooters, may be laying the groundwork for a new Purple Soul fight, and Star Fox's gameplay appears surprisingly suitable for the task. Deltarune's darkest hour is fast approaching, but how do we connect all these little breadcrumbs? When would something like this happen, and why? Alphys has a poster on her wall, sure, but why would she be involved in this fight? Would she be the Andross? Is she coming to a dark world? Who gives a shit about a goddamn poster anyway? I'm so glad you asked. We need to do a deep dive on the way in which Deltarune communicates to its player. I promise these findings will be very, very interesting. Video games allow you as the player to move in two distinct directions, towards progress or away from it. Games are usually built in a way that draws the player forward without outright forcing them, while allowing for deviations and expression along a predetermined path. Typically, there will only be one ending, but players can still have their own unique experiences. Take Super Mario Bros. For example. You go get the flag at the end of the level, but along the way you can grab coins, stomp Koopas, find power-ups, and maybe even some secret areas tucked away here and there. That's where the player expression is found, in the how you get there. When you spend time breaking bricks for hidden coins and lives, you're technically moving away from progress. With every second the timer ticks down. But thanks to your exploration, you could end up with a score that's better than simply maximizing speed. You're going to end up at the flag regardless. It's not like you can walk to the left. There's a wall there, and it follows you, and it stops you from going backwards, just perfectly out of sight. After all, once you make real progress, you can't go back to those old areas, unless you reset. Deltarune communicates to us as players several different ways. How does it convey information? How does it reveal its secrets? We're looking for this game's rhyming scheme, the relationship between introduction and execution of an idea. Where can we find the poetry? The game's in-universe author character openly asks us to read between the lines. So, what do we find when we do? When we go beyond what plain text can tell us about how this world is structured? Let's start small. The egg. Specifically, the egg from Chapter 1. I've often seen people posit that it would be impossible to discover the egg room on your own without outside information. I want to press this perspective a bit, and actually use this room as an example of how Deltarune invites the player to explore and connect to its world. If we enter the room normally, we can ring the bell at the end of the path, making the area much safer to explore. However, if you enter this room from the right-hand side, the flying Starwalker is back. Continue to head left and ring the bell. Starwalker will scurry off to the right, despite the orientation flip. Therefore, we actually have an opportunity to chase Starwalker down. If you suspect you can catch it, you can retry this puzzle as many times as you like. The timing is tight, which makes it all the more rewarding when you get some money from its ambient luster. We're moving in a boomerang pattern, moving through the room in one direction, and then optimizing our movement on the return direction. The Starwalker challenge doesn't happen when you go through the room normally. Take the boomerang approach to the normal path, and you'll find the original Starwalker, an enduring figure, a companion on your adventure, stalwart in devotion. This moment encapsulates a lot of what makes Deltarune so intriguing and fun to engage with, where interaction and freedom of movement grow and evolve the rooms you find yourself in. Returning to old areas in Chapter 1 once Susie joins your party for real reveals new spare solutions and new dialogue opportunities. You can earn the spin cake by fixing up the broken one and returning it to Top Chef near the beginning of the Dark World. Returning to the long elevator in Card Castle will allow you to access another floor. We can speak to Jevil, and we learn of Sham's involvement. Returning to them allows new dialogue, and further incentive to revisit previous areas. There are incentives to backtrack all over the place, especially if you are looking for those keys. The music resets on this screen transition, on top of all the gamified elements of the room. Someone is going to find that egg room eventually. It's a small chance, but still, it's well within the odds that someone will discover it, and it's natural for rumors of the room to spread. It almost feels like it's designed to be found specifically by curious players, and again, only a fraction of those curious players. It isn't simply a convoluted, impossible no-clip into the out-of-bounds. It's a small glint in the darkness, designed to be discovered, but only by an individual of extreme diligence, or by a community of obsessive enthusiasts. Playground rumors about video games are a fundamental piece of gaming culture's foundation, and I feel like Toby has a crystal clear understanding of what makes them so fun and intriguing. Don't forget, Undertale had that voice file urging players to avoid spoiling the contents of the game data. Don't go posting online, it doesn't make you cool, you'll ruin the fun. There should be personalized fun values, there should be rumors and anomalies not experienced by everyone, because it enriches the world. It adds so much depth, and it makes it stand out in your mind and your heart all the more. Cyber City's traffic puzzles also demand some tight maneuvering, if you're looking to duck under the bridge and explore the lower left of the screen. You've got to stagger the red and yellow lights, and weave between the stopped cars without losing your momentum. Your reward is the only knockable door in Cyber City, a tricky Tony cameo, a pile of moss, a bed of trash, and a familiar-looking tree, drawn in green, mentioning a room in between. The music resets on this screen transition as well. Even if you think this is referring to the Tony room, you can't just dismiss that scarlet forest tree and the musical oddities. By 2021, every fan knew about the egg. I bet much more people came across this one naturally compared to the egg in Chapter 1. But I will still hold that it was intentionally designed to be found by the curious and diligent. Not everyone, but just enough to start those rumors and spread the word. There are several branching paths in Deltarune, but they usually lead to secrets rather than being true alternate paths forward. In general, walking to the right makes progress, but it doesn't hurt to check the left before moving forward. When you see a little path off to the left, definitely check it out. Checking the left should be hardwired into you as a player. Games usually urge you to move towards the right. Even games that present from the top down will favor moving rightward. The early pioneers of the video game medium ensured we became accustomed to moving to the right. But, by now, the area behind the player feels inherently understood as a great place to put secrets. In the 80s, moving left in a video game was the very definition of subversion. It's so unnatural, it's unsettling to move to the left. So much so that checking the left has become a trope all its own. There's an unspoken language between players and developers in this way. If you see an area you think you might be able to traverse, give it a try. Odds are the developers were building that allure into the world intentionally, silently signaling paths to players who possess a certain level of skill or curiosity. One of the most monumental achievements in world design, progression, and atmosphere released all the way back in 1986. Not Zelda, but Nintendo's Metroid. It spawned a genre so unique, it is known simply by its namesake. The title screen greets you with a starry night, accompanied by dark and foreboding music, full of mystery. The darkness gives way to a hopeful little tune of triumph as you trek into the unknown. And in its opening minutes, Metroid would flip convention on its head completely. You've got a D-pad and 4 buttons, one of which pauses the game. You pick up the basics pretty quickly as you head to the right and begin your adventure. After just a few enemies, you come to a wall with a small passage at its base. It's a dead end. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Maybe there's something you missed. So you comb every inch of this tiny world as you go back to spawn, and you discover that by heading left, beyond the spawn screen, you can obtain the morphing ball, allowing you to squeeze through those tight spaces. Mind-blowing. The developers can put stuff behind you? I spawned in here, but the stuff is over there? Wait a minute. There is no behind me. It's just the world, as it is, in its fullness, waiting to be explored. It was always there, it was always an option to you, but you've got to see the whole stage in a different light for a thought like checking the left to even cross your mind. When Super Metroid rolled around, an initial playthrough will feel pretty scripted and linear, but by meeting the animals, we'll learn to wall jump and shine spark. When you return to the game again, you might find yourself taking a different path, thanks to your newfound skills. Because of these fancy little movement tricks designed specifically for experienced players, Super Metroid becomes one of the most open-ended games of all time, and a genuine masterpiece that holds up to this day. By now, checking the left, or more specifically, exploring every possible available avenue, is a well-established convention in game design. Whether in 2D, top-down, or full-blown 3D, devs hide things behind the player all the time. In platformers, developers may structure routes that are more difficult, but faster for the skilled players. This kind of environment encourages more player expression, allowing players to determine their own pace, enriching the world through exploration, bringing the player into it more closely. Metroid Prime marked the franchise transition to 3D, and it still stands as one of the highest rated games of all time. Its approach to storytelling preserved the isolating and hostile atmosphere of previous games, with its narrative largely being atmospheric, experienced through world design. Optionally, players could engage the scan visor to search for hints and lore tidbits. In doing so, you'll begin uncovering the Chozo prophecy and lore. The Chozo were an incredibly advanced civilization, with time as a dimension being one they could read from and predict in their own mysterious sci-fi way. As certain disaster loomed for their planet, the Chozo began preparing for a chosen one, someone who stood unwavering in the face of the swirling darkness, someone whose hope shined on in the depths, the figure of a woman burning brightly, overcoming impossible odds to purge a great evil. Samus is not destined to overcome these calamities. Rather, she is a force of nature that the universe must reckon with. There is no divinity in this franchise, only the unstoppable will of a woman with a capacity for incredible strength. As a matter of necessity, only someone free from prophetic doom would be able to stand against it. It doesn't so much mean that doom will certainly be overcome, just that, in order for doom to be beaten, someone, anyone, must stand outside of its certainty. In this way, I feel Deltarune's prophecy in relation to Susie is not one of certainty, but one of necessity. Whether she is one of the three heroes or the final girl with hope crossed on her heart, it isn't really up to the amorphous prophecy. Susie's role is up to Susie, and what she wants to do for her friends. She's able to rise beyond the perceived limitations of the game, and our control numerous times. She will be a force to be reckoned with, not by prophetic designation, but by her own will and power. Being the white pen of hope, able to chart a new future, is a way of expressing that the prophecy must reckon with Susie. She is the sequence breaker in the narrative, a concept that the entire Metroidvania genre thrives on. I don't know if Toby was inspired by Samus in regards to Susie, but the plain text of these Chozo prophecies are, at the very least, symbolically relevant in my mind. I replayed the game while writing this review, and it definitely stuck out to me. I want to keep exploring these connections between backtracking and Deltarune's alternative routes. I focus so intensely on Metroid because of what it means to me personally, and its exemplary integration of backtracking with prior knowledge as a core tenet of its entire design. Samus moves like a tank. There's momentum in your power suit to play with, but you've got to really learn her limits to take control in an elegant way. In the 3D games, it originally had a tank-like control scheme. You could really only aim precisely by standing still, only ever using the left stick for both movement and aiming. The GameCube had 2 analog sticks, but they chose to use the secondary stick to switch your beam type. As you progress, you grow stronger, and the controller itself opens up to you. Buttons and abilities are restored, and as your weaponry evolves, so does your relationship to this world, through the controller, and the visor, the UI, and how it's presented. Once you learn this world, once you see how it unfolds, you can return again and try to break that path of progression. You remember where your abilities are, and what was required to obtain them. The game builds landmarks around its significant upgrades that help to make the path more clear to you. Deltarune is doing this too, by asking us to return to older chapters and explore further. The Backstage Mantle game might be my favorite little landmark in Deltarune. It's haunting in its presentation, and it communicates some big ideas with very little text. Let's start with this Birdly stand-in. In Board 1, you might encounter it before your max power. It hops from tree to tree and you're unable to do damage. Once you reach max power, head left to return to the bird. When you strike at it, the palms are destroyed much more easily than Birdly. This illustrates your new power, and it's up to you to apply it. You don't get a reward for killing the bird. Rather, you're given proof that you can break free of the game's usual structure. You're surrounded by trees as soon as you leave the blue area. You can plunge headlong into the unknown, or you can travel even farther left and check out the known areas that were previously gated. If you go straight into the trees, you'll miss everything else. See you soon, having fun, and our friend cameo. I especially love these as they're hidden just out of sight, beyond what we can see. And maybe this is just my experience, but I feel that most players go for the trees immediately. They might check out the weed room to the left of the sword cave, but I don't think many players would check both sides of the pyramid as their first instinct. At the very least, it doesn't seem like the game is built that way. We're taught to kill things in order to progress. It's not possible to kill this last thing without breaking a tree. So if you somehow hadn't tried it yet, the game makes sure you know right there, and then it gives you a bunch of trees. The trees cannot box you in. We're being asked how we can exploit the game. How can we exploit the very way it's structured? Answering that question gives us the ice key. Board 2 is a little more direct with its messaging. Because caves redirect you to spawn, there are not very many paths for us to check. We can only kill a handful of enemies before we get the power to slash scrubs. But even then, there's only 2 places with scrubs, the waterfall and our spawn. When you make it out to the ocean, every cave, Atlantis, the lawnmower game, it all points you to the Isle of Northern Light. Only the Isle of Love has a unique interaction, where Tenna laments the game being based on Mantle. Interestingly, south of the border and Keygen share a similar tune. Tenna is here to create a smile in our hearts, to entertain, to connect. It's a pretty pointed parallel to have Tenna in the Roots hallway, here in the Isle of Love. In the digital Roots, where we fight Spamton, we load his soul into a body that doesn't belong to him. I think the red heart-shaped Spamton Keygen connected Roots hallway might be further evidence that something happened to Kris in the shelter. Anyways, once we get to the Ice Palace, there are 2 hint rooms that teach us how to make it through the dungeon. Follow the white cloak, and the forbidden path began with ice magic. In typical Zelda style, we need to obtain an item, and then use it to overcome obstacles that we saw on our way in. Eventually, the only room we can go leads us to an NPC standing completely still. Attacking it does nothing at all, so you leave the room and head to the left. Now, a completely new path is found behind you. The white-cloaked NPC is following you, shooting ice whenever you swing your sword. Once you start heading left, it's very straightforward. Eventually, you return to the bird enemy, who you can freeze and bypass. I don't have to tell you what this represents, but now that I think about it, there may be even more abstract symbolism at play. Board 2 and Chapter 2 feel like they share a similar structure. Halfway through, we're separated from the show host, the person who knows how things ought to play out, someone who would protest attempts to go off script, but ultimately, thanks to their love for their companions, or their contestants, they come to believe they can make a new path. We get a chance to tell Tenna we love TV so many times, and we get 2 opportunities to hug Ralsei and give him a plushie. These characters are not direct parallels, but functionally, there's some level of symbolic representation here. Anyways, Tenna leaves, and Susie uses this opportunity to switch our controllers, and we have a new playstyle at our disposal. Almost immediately, we are given a choice. Do we want to continue controlling this character, or go back to our usual arrangement? While in control of this character, we actually have the ability to choose things that the character would not actually like. The ribbon for Susie, or killing your friend for Noelle. These 2 things are not equivalent, I understand that, but bear with me. Eventually, we are united with the show host, but on board 2, we're still given an opportunity to explicitly disobey and disregard what they believe is going to happen. We can go back and explore the Northern Isles, and get a moment from Susie, expressing a curiosity for what's beyond the boundaries of the video game's usual camera. In the weird route, we're separated from Ralsei once again, when we fight Spamton Neo. And that's definitely when we start to reach beyond the boundaries of the game, with Kris shouting for Susie and Ralsei, while we, the player, whisper for Noelle. It's no coincidence that the Ice Palace is what's left just barely out of sight. During TV time, Board 2 is a silly little romp with unique opportunities to explore and further develop these characters. During our backstage venture, Board 2 becomes a lot more streamlined. Compared to Tenna's version, it's abbreviated heavily to allocate time for the dungeon. There are all the obvious parallels to the Weird Route, but also plenty of thematic symbolism that ties the two together that I think gets overlooked. Sqoya, what are you doing?
Crack.
Here's the worst, most insane part of the Board 2 Chapter 2 connections. Two people who had their own issues before our involvement as a third party are connected together by a man who speaks in hands. Their unification creates an impure symbol of love, the Rainbow Bridge. The two characters who are brought together are also pretty transcoded. El, Nina, and La, Nino, who have feminine and masculine pronouns as a part of their names. I don't think this is unintentional, or a stretch in any kind of way. Deltarune is woke and full of queer representation. Kris is most definitely transgender by nature of being non-binary. And with how involved and aware of the community Toby seems to be, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Noelle's room is confirmation of the long-held fan headcanon that she is trans as well. Rule's card, being the self-proclaimed Lord of Puzzles, also seems thematically relevant. Let me be clear, I don't think Rules is Gaster, but I think it's totally fine for him to act as a symbolic stand-in for a particular connection. He doesn't have to be a direct analog in every respect for this one little scene to gain a new connotation. The hand animations inside the text box for just this scene is crazy. I don't think I'm super off base in saying that the symbolism is intentional. I don't think Rules starts a polycule for the funnies. There's a purpose to everything. The jokes always feed into characterization. Rules later removes your ability to do anything but act, trapping you into dodging, while he hires people to shoot at you. Rules' lovers eventually break themselves free of the guided, laser-pointed path he's conceived for them. I don't think these are literal representations of Gaster, Kris, and Noelle, but I feel there is a symbolic relevance to these shenanigans, as crazy as it may sound. In the Weird Route, you do have two queer characters in Kris and Noelle, and you do force them onto a sort of heteronormative relationship. I think the rainbow becoming an impure symbol of love kind of reflects this, as a way of corrupting these two teenagers in their queer identities. Back to Noelle and her importance as communicated through the Mantle game. She is someone who is known to be adept at video games, who is known to stumble across secrets easily. According to her blog, Noelle was able to find her way through the Ice Palace without a guide consistently every time, even though the maze was different each run. Noelle is most certainly the White Cloak. The Ice Palace is an abstract representation of the Weird Route. That's obvious. What isn't so obvious is how the Mantle game literally spells out how to initiate the route. When you meet the cloaked figure, you can hurt it as many times as you want. Nothing changes. It doesn't seem as if any progress can be made. But as soon as you head left, Noelle joins your party, and you begin solving puzzles with her ice magic. She is the key. You aren't able to kill enemies without Noelle. They always flee. You are unable to activate these switches or bypass this bird. You need Noelle. Her ability to break games open is central to her position in Deltarune. Noelle is troubled by her sibling, December Holiday, and their disappearance. In fact, Des really haunts the entire narrative. You start seeing it everywhere. Well, when you have a bat, everything looks like a ball. If we assume Des is the knight, and we will for time's sake, we know that their memories of Gerson were able to give life to the dusty hammer in Alvin's drawer. Darkner's patterned after memories of the fountain's creator. We know Gerson was a teacher, and we know that Alphys is new to teaching. It's very likely that Gerson was a mentor or teacher figure of some kind to December. Someone who invited them to look at life without the rigidity provided by the Holiday family. The fact December prefers to be called Des, and that choice is respected long after the disappearance, says a lot to me about Des's ability to blaze their own path and write their own story. Their box of miscellaneous goodies give us a window into the sheer variety occupying that life. By the time I began replaying the game for this script, it seemed like most of every secret had been found. But there was one in particular that had caught my eye, following Gerson even further left in order to gain one single point of HP. What I noticed surrounding this segment is just insane. By all accounts, I will sound insane. But here we go. We enter a dark maze and begin poking around. We see a figure in the darkness and we give chase, until an unearthly groan causes Rousey to panic, screaming, "Run left now." Pause. Run left? Not west? Rousey has given us directions before, displaying a knowledge he probably shouldn't have. But in this tense moment where time is of the essence, he cuts straight past Kris and Susie's understanding of directions and goes straight for us, the player. Continuing, we use an unconventional stool to reach a green book, opening the path forward. The man throws his green cane into the battle box, showing us where to go. We come to a four-way intersection, and our characters form up to represent these four cardinal directions. Kris is in the leftward position, which is the correct way to go. We find a piano key, and then head left a second time. We have the opportunity to head left again when prompted by the old man. He will then float across the gap to a treasure chest, where we are awarded 1 HP for checking the left. Following this segment, Gerson asks that we come visit his little study. Susie is resistant, saying we'll never stop in. But it's the very next room. There's no avoiding it, right? Right? No, left. From Kris's perspective, this blurring of the lines between our perception and Kris's continue taking their left and proceeding until we're brought back to the dark, spooky maze where we met the old man. Except the maze is gone. It's disappeared. It's nowhere to be found. But there exists a sparkle. Interacting with it prompts us to hug the wall. What's an extremely common technique for solving mazes? Take every left turn, hug the wall. That way, you can always backtrack. It kind of feels like Gerson, who directly asks us to read between the lines and chart our own path, is strongly encouraging us to go left and hug the wall. This teacher, reanimated through December's memories, is telling us something about mazes. Wouldn't it be crazy if there was some December holiday-themed maze somewhere in the game in which you could take every single left turn and end up exactly where you need to be? Wouldn't that be ridiculous if a chapter in Deltarune featured a tutorial for a puzzle in a previous chapter? A puzzle that you could stumble through aimlessly anyways? Tutorials both applicable in the immediacy, but proven even more so applicable for the previous chapter? Gerson's advice in Chapter 4 may be related to us getting closer to solving what happened to Des, as reflected in the gumball maze. It's like he's literally spelling out what to do when we find ourselves lost, without direction, by giving us a very literal set of directions. Funnily enough, the Scarlet Forest in Chapter 1 seems to parallel this connection in its own way. We find ourselves lost in a forest. The correct way to go is the path not taken by the villains. We progress by going in the direction that does not initially seem to be correct. Taking a wrong turn here resets your progress. On top of that, Lancer laughs like Santa Claus while lamenting about being lost and confused. We don't need Gerson's advice in order to find this black triangle that feels like lacquer. It's a wonderful connection, but I feel that Gerson's enthusiasm for backtracking is more so linked to how Deltarune's worlds and exploration is structured. Gerson is the in-universe author character who invites us to read between the lines. Much like Toby, Gerson parodies existing work. The Prophecy becomes Lord of the Hammer, Punch-Out becomes the Giga Queen fight, and so on and so forth. Gerson invites us to pick up the white pen of hope, the one that can overwrite the dark. Think literally here, like Susie does. A whiteout pen, going back over a sentence that was already written in order to write something new. It's like that boomerang pattern I mentioned when we analyzed the Starwalker room. When we think we've seen everything, double back, keep exploring. Return to old areas and try everything possible. Try a different approach when it seems like all hope is lost for the tale. Chapter 3's mantle game plays out a lot more literally than Gerson's advice. When we meet the White Cloak, nothing happens until we head left. In the same way, when we meet Noelle, nothing out of the ordinary happens until we head left, and explore all options available to us. Maybe you're returning to Chapter 2 after playing the Sword route, or you're like me in 2021 and you want to introduce Noelle to Newbert. If you use the X Take Care command, Noelle's turn is skipped, and the first Viro Kun explains how battles work. However, if you choose to keep Noelle in the dark, exploring her magic menu will reveal the Ice Shock command. In Deltarune, you can't deplete an enemy's health. They'll run away before dying, unless you freeze them. Even freezing one enemy is enough to make you go, hey, what the hell? It's there, on the overworld, unable to run away. Maybe you have that thought in the back of your brain. Is this how you do the Deltarune genocide run? After all, it just told me Noelle became stronger. You encounter all these strange dialogue options. Why not pick the fucked up and strange ones? It's not like you need a guide on literally every dialogue prompt. If you've played through the game normally, you know that most of this is not here. When it gives you an option between keep being weird or just kidding, abandon it all and go back to normal, the morbidly curious player is going to know what to do. They don't need a guide for that. Is the weird route strange and convoluted? Yes. Can you easily abort the route if you aren't careful? Yes. Is it impossible? Creepypasta levels of fuckery in order to start it? No. I mean, it is creepypasta coded intentionally, but the game is not haunted. It's a simple matter of backtracking, exploring all possible player expression. New spells, new gear, new solutions to puzzles. All you have to do in order to begin the forbidden path of ice magic is walk to the left. Hindsight is 20/20, sure, but this is something that the obsessively diligent player will uncover. Not everyone, and not just anyone, but the players who are looking for every possible option available to them. In a game where it seems that fate is inevitable, this may be exactly what we feel the need to do, going between the lines in the hope of a new future. By all accounts, it seems Deltarune has a main path where we can recruit enemies and experience the story in its fullness. It has a weird route where we can break free from the expectations and normalcies put up around us by exploiting the game mechanics and exploring to the fullest. Freedom. There is a neutral route as well, one where you don't recruit every enemy, but don't completely break the game either. I dub this the Twisted Route, after the Twisted Sword, a blade that can only be obtained with the Thorn Ring and Pure Crystal. The weapon has stats, and it's not stronger than a Black Shard, but I don't think this is particularly relevant. I also don't think Toby is going to stick with the placeholder values thrown in there 5 years ago. This thing is weird, and I don't think he wants to give away all of its information before it proves relevant. If you fully complete the weird route in Chapter 2, it's revealed in Chapter 4 that Kris returns Noelle's watch, and we equip Noelle with the Thorn Ring, meaning it's out of our inventory, and we're unable to craft with it. Unless we're somehow able to remove the trance-inducing ring in a future chapter, assuming Noelle rejoins our party at some point. There's a lot unknown in that scenario. If you do the weird route up until the Birdly fight, and simply choose not to equip Noelle with the Thorn Ring, you get to keep it. The route is abandoned, and you can carry on as normal as you can, considering the lost recruits. This structures out a route for us, the Twisted Route. Do everything except Snowgrave. We continue like nothing happened, even though those recruits have been lost, and gain access to a strange item, whose other ingredient still remains entirely unknown. Considering how similar it is to the normal route, I don't think this sword is going to let us cut our strings and escape the prophecy. No matter which of these 3 routes you take, you're going to end up at Venom. That's right, I'm back on Star Fox. You've got these 3 routes you can jump between, with varying difficulty and complexity. Even though 2 of them are quite similar, they stand unique. We are accompanied by anthropomorphic animals with dialogue portraits and talking sprites. Even though they appear quite human, they can become predictable with enough playtime. A diligent eye searching for patterns may uncover hidden routes, like the awesome black hole, for example. You know, a place darker than dark, that not even light can escape. In fact, Fox's father was lost in this cosmic graveyard because of experiments by Dr. Andros. Oh yeah, and check out the colors in the background of his boss fight. On another route, you fly into a paper crane enemy that emerges from a seemingly indestructible meteor, and enter an alternate dimension. Normally, running into enemies hurts you. You're supposed to shoot them, after all. But shooting this one will rob you of this chance. General Pepper pleads with Fox to turn back and help the galaxy. But, continuing into this dimension, reveals a bizarro world where paper planes fold themselves and fly at you. Eventually, you come to a giant slot machine, and it all comes down to dumb luck. Once you beat it, you've got to manually shoot the letters in the credits to spell out the end. And all this does is spell it out. Enemies will keep coming, and keep resetting the letters. You can continue this to no avail. There's no real ending here. You've fully broken through, and it probably didn't leave you very satisfied, did it? Star Fox was inspired by Star Wars. The team flies R-Wings, quite similar in name and appearance to X-Wings. The Venom stage begins with a trench run, with enemies that look extremely similar to the Hoth snow speeders and the Empire's motorcycle speeders on Endor. These references don't mean that Star Fox is a beat-for-beat parody of Star Wars, but rather that they share symbolic relevance to each other. In the same way, I believe Deltarune shares symbolic relevance to Star Fox. Star Fox is not going to determine how Deltarune plays out. The twisted route may never come to fruition. There may not be a third route at all. This doesn't mean that Star Fox's 3 alternate paths to the same ending bear no relevance. It can still stand as symbolically relevant to the predetermined ending we will meet no matter the route we take. No matter which of the 3 routes you take, you will always end up at Venom, flying through a narrow passageway of obstacles and enemies dumped into an amorphous space colored with pink and yellow, fighting a giant face that, in the most difficult route, transforms into a cat-like demon with an attack that draws you in close, breathing in, pulling everything in the area into it, and then expelling it out back towards you as you dodge frantically. An attack shared by the Roaring Knight, Spamton Neo, and the Chapter 4 Titan. Venom. Poison. Certain Doom. What a name for your finale. The sky in this scene is so beautiful, with the light barely coming in, piercing the darkness. As Andross's base explodes behind you, checking in to see if our friends are still doing okay, and heading back home. Beyond these largely symbolic parallels, the pink and gold background to the Andross fight is not literal confirmation of a friend fight in a Star Fox style, but it feels symbolically relevant to everything else discussed in this theory. A loved one of our protagonist being lost somewhere darker than dark, created by the experiments of a rogue doctor, is not literal proof of my theory, but it stands as symbolically relevant to the connections between these games. I kick this off by calling attention to the Astral Wolf poster, but let's really look at the name of this parody franchise and think about it as symbolically relevant to Deltarune. Astral can be defined as of relating to, emanating from, or resembling the stars. Space, right? It can also be defined as of or relating to a supersensible body believed by theosophists to coexist with and survive the death of the human physical body. Like astral projection, a power unique to Kris. You'd use the word astral to describe something that's capable of separating its soul from its body, or a soul that would persist after the death of a body, like Kris, our little non-binary dog thing. Seriously, this game makes sure to connect Kris to dogs very, very often. Kris howls on multiple occasions. Kris begs for treats. Kris wears dog jammies. Kris sniffs out clues. Kris is our Astral Wolf. Thinking again of Star Wars' inextricable ties to Star Fox, Luke Skywalker loses his hand in a confrontation that flips the entire world and everything we know on its head. Kris, as our Astral Wolf, is probably going to follow in these footsteps. There's a mountain of evidence for the idea that Kris will lose their hand, but this Astral Wolf Star Fox Star Wars connection makes it feel even more certain. God, wouldn't it be crazy if there was already a character in the game directly connected to Star Fox whose limb is severely injured? It probably feels like we're putting a lot of stock into this poster, so I'd like to backtrack to our segment on checking the left and push that idea a little further. When you play Deltarune, you begin in the light world, and eventually reach a point of no return, in which you enter the dark world. Before entering each dark world, there's plenty of flavor text and characters to interact with. However, even if you inspected something in Chapter 1, there's no guarantee that the interaction will play out in the same way in Chapter 2, or Chapter 4. In fact, every single thing that you can interact with in Chapter 1's prologue has received alternate text interactions in future chapters, except in the school. And even though we've returned to Alfie's classroom 3 separate days, we are still only ever able to read that one poster. Alfie's and Toriel have wallpapers that change between chapters. Why doesn't this poster? We know for a fact there are other quotes on the wall. Why does Kris only ever read this one? The one that tells them they should try their best, even in their darkest hour. Even in the chapter epilogues, pretty much all of Hometown becomes fresh in each new installment. When you replay a chapter, you can immediately go back to sleep and skip over these prologue light world segments and head straight for the point of no return, straight into the real gameplay. When you enter the dark world, you can only ever head to the right. You've passed the point of no return. You can no longer check the literal left. That's what these prologues are. Each light world section is, quote unquote, the left of that chapter. It's the enrichment, the character, the fleshing out of the world, the area behind the player, the area Kris has known forever that we cannot see, the area that doesn't matter. In each chapter, a repeat visit will allow us to skip over an even more significant portion of Kris's life. We're able to completely strip them of their expression and head straight to the right. You skip literal hours in chapter 4. Is all this character development just extra? Bonus? Why do we continue to get this option that allows us to skip over it all? Here's something funny. What's the only chapter in the game thus far that doesn't have a light world prologue? Chapter 3. The one based on video games and TV. The one made by the character who's in on this scheme. The one who most understands the way in which the soul is connected to them. What's the only dark world that allows us to explore the left of our spawn point? Chapter 3. What chapter allows us to control fantasy versions of ourselves in a world that seems so real you won't believe it's not? All of them, but Chapter 3 spells it out literally. What does this mean? We check the left and receive a sneeze. Is that what the light world will become to us? Just a sneeze? We become filled with the power of not sneezing. We become filled with the power of detaching ourselves entirely from the real world that we live in. We reach a point of no return, but checking the left again shows our little couch scurrying off. You can't go back to sleep and skip the left anymore. You're committed to the left checking, clearly. I can't help but think about how Kris was known to be quiet before the player suddenly begins interacting with every single resident in town. This entire prologue revolves around the light world, with Rousey's cutscene, until we find ourselves in the midst of the game show, and the dark world truly begins. From that point forward, we can only head right. When we're tasked to stay on schedule and appease the structure, we look for ways around the guidelines. The S-rank room, the cold place, sneaking by the watchful eyes. Chapter 3 is representative of Deltarune as we, the player, experience it. Personally, I didn't S-rank board 1 on my first try. I got an A rank, but once I heard there was a round 2, I knew I could improve and unlock that door next time. I ended up discovering the little whack-a-mole shadow guy picture game for points, and grinded my way up to 1500. Getting in the raft, Tenna tells me to explore, so I go check every single nook and cranny before getting the weather duo back together. I found the Isle of Love, the lawnmower game, and a weird little cave dock that made Tenna nervous. Eventually, he tried to tell me the ocean just loops. Everything here is unfinished. But I know what I saw. I relent and deliver Lanino to Lover's Peak. Tenna receives his second mysterious call of the board, and so much of his behavior is sending up red flags. I beeline for the raft and head back out to sea. To my surprise, Rousey protests, but Susie knows exactly where we're going. She lifts the barrier out of the way, and we eventually make land on the Isle of Northern Light. Our way is blocked by a tree. On board 1 there was a path blocked by cactuses that I totally dismissed until that moment. As we head back, Susie starts talking about being curious as to what's beyond what you can see. A real boundary breaker. Someone else known for her ability to break free of the usual confines. We wrap the board and I get flashbanged by the name of a month as we play Guitar Hero. I'm still reeling from that shock when I head into the S-rank room, and I am met with even more of a shock. A freedom, big shot, world revolving penumbra phantasm type shock. Pink and yellow controller type shock. Hidden manhole type shock. The manhole you can apparently access by doing bad on purpose. Why would anyone ever want to do that? Who would think to try that? It's someone who wants freedom. Someone who simply just wants to see what happens. And that's what this game backstage is. I grow stronger, just like the cave tells me, until I can break that bush I saw at the start. I know I need to get to the Northern Isles, but how? I find the same bushes in a little lake at the base of a waterfall, and therein lies the secret. Filled with anticipation, I come to the bush and strike it down. Still utterly confused and a bit scared by everything, I walk to the left and there is a door. In this icy land. I'm a truck freak. I followed those newsletters. I explored the sweepstakes ARG websites. I knew I was looking at the Ice Palace. I go to the door, and it freezes. A sharp note of rejection. Aren't you forgetting something important? Black screen. I knew I needed to reset and play board 1 again. I needed to employ my knowledge of the game in order to make the most amount of points possible. My first time, I didn't know I could buy an S rank for 1500 points. I didn't know it was better to stack up food for the VIP guests rather than try and feed every single shadow guy. Now, I know that Kris's favorite food is pie, that Azriel's actually ashamed of liking the green dinosaur, that Rousey is not actually priceless and is in fact $32 MSRP, and I know that the highly memorable tagline for TV Time is Marvelous Mystery Board, even though this fuck says don't touch that dial twice before encountering this quiz. Now, I know that pushing this pyramid will block off that mysterious path, so I should explore that instead of the pointless mailroom, and I know that I should check out the path in the forest blocked off by cacti. Hang around on this screen long enough, and Susie says, you know, it would be totally epic to have a weapon and cut down everything. Like, it became clear to me this was supposed to happen. It became clear to me that you really are not supposed to luck into an S rank on board 1. I'm sure you can, but I was not one of those skilled few who aced it all on the first hand. I had to reshuffle my deck and begin again. You'd think replaying a linear game would be pretty black and white, but there's actually a lot of room for you to explore and color in your own copy with care. Take what you've learned and move forward with it. Why does Deltarune include tutorials for previous chapters? Why else unless we are meant to roll back time, using what we've learned to take a different approach? This is a conclusion that the lore heads have come to long ago, that the prophecy will be so unfortunate that a player will attempt to break free of the game's structure through the weird route, in hopes of overwriting it. To me, it's really cool to see this idea reinforced in the gameplay of Deltarune, reflected in its structure. There's a moment in Chapter 3's Sword Route where you betray a childhood friend, even though they've done everything you've asked. You then enter the shelter and fight the mantle boss. The graphics are drawn in a way that makes it appear as if there's a CRT filter, when it's usually pixel perfect. This CRT filter appears, and Kris's health becomes tethered with the hero's sprite. In the days of CRT, artists often compose their sprites with an awareness of how the filter would affect them, making for very cool visuals. The game is aware of our perspective as the player, and it presents itself in a way conscious of that perspective, in order to connect us to it more deeply. Only we can see that CRT filter. And then, Kris literally walks into the game to acquire the mantle. The player gets sucked into the game completely. With the idea that Chapter 3 serves as this representation of Deltarune, as it is experienced by us, with us replaying chapters and maximizing our exploration for hidden secrets or a better score, I can't help but think of one particular prophecy panel. The Lord of Screens, cleaved red by blade. Did you know, cleave can both mean to split something apart and to unite two things together. It's known as a contronym for holding two opposing meanings. We, as the player, are a sort of Lord of Screens, with our eyes burning red, the red soul imbued within the sword hero, tethered to Kris, their health, and their agency. This connection, this experiment, is slowly growing darker. We may become so connected to this world that we may willingly take Deltarune's darkest hour into our own hands through a vessel we've cleaved and twist it even darker. These branching paths in Deltarune make its world feel more real. Whether it's a branch off to a secret or an entirely new route, the world becomes more fleshed out and believable, especially as you begin to reach the screen on the weird route. Our connection is deepening, and we're becoming something fully within this world, by referencing the knowledge we shouldn't have. The knowledge we'd only have if we'd seen the future, knowing how things played out. The ultimate go left is a reset, a fresh run, with everything we know, fully exploring our options, just to know what happens. But, is that really the true meaning of freedom? Should we treat this world like nothing more than a game? Like, should we have Kris act as if their own friends and family are nothing more than lines of code? These characters we've grown to love, Is it really connection if we go through with the weird route? Maybe, by going to sleep, we can shut our eyes to the lives they live and the reality they know in the light world. Maybe that will make it easier to do what we have to do. Do we even have to do it? Is there any escape? Or will an alternate dimension leave us fully unsatisfied, reliant on a surreal entity dealing in luck, entirely unbound by anything resembling a game at all? We can and should remain steadfast. We should stay trapped on this line, maintaining our integrity, hurtling headlong towards fate, unable to stop, as certain as it may be. We can talk with our classmates each day, flush the toilet, and read a little word of encouragement on our classroom wall. Don't give up, Astral Wolf, even in your darkest hour. This unchanging poster may just be a word of encouragement, something to lift us up at the start of each adventure, a simple, consistent reminder to keep going. But I'm choosing to read between the lines. Stop! Stop! That isn't true. In Chapter 4, we can take Susie to look at the Astral Wolf poster, and she says nothing about it. In fact, she thinks it would be better if it was a fucking Garfield poster. I was gonna point to this poster that's here, unchanging, every time we're in the left of the light world, the daily mundane of Kris's life. The parts that were there before we were, that we, as the player, the one controlling them, can throw out into the garbage, that we can skip over by going back to sleep. This poster of motivation in Alfie's classroom, formerly Gerson's, with all our friends on a 3x3 grid with Kris in the center, I was going to point to that original, stalwart, consistent source of motivation that asks us to look to the stars in our darkest hour. And then Susie's here like, heh, what if Garfield had a top hat? Dude, that would be so sick, right? God damn it, girl, fuck you. This is what I get. It's like a divine punishment. I spent so much time on this theory. I played through the game so many times just to make sure I didn't miss anything, so I could see and verify everything firsthand, to make sure what I had written would actually capture my feelings. And I went through periods where I didn't want to touch it. Like, there was never a way that I could fully accomplish my vision. Like, what I wanted to communicate could never be understood. That kept me from so much growth and learning. The time it took for this theory to be fully written was probably not all that long, if you just count the keystrokes. But the amount of times I doubled back over everything I'd written and tried an entirely new perspective, a perspective I could have never arrived at, unless I'd pushed myself forward into the unknown, it's too many to count. It was this process that made me fall in love with Deltarune all over again. I don't think I'll ever fully be able to communicate to you the connection I've strengthened with the world of this game. I played Undertale when I was 16. It's been part of my life for 10 years. The hope this game gave me shaped my soul and taught me so much about the world that I was sheltered from. It worked its way into my roots and became something... Wait a minute, hold on, something's bothering me. Garfield in a top hat. Oh my god. Garfield and friends? Garfield and friends? An orange cat and their friends? Like Bitroots, like the shelter? We're so back. We're so back. The digital roots in Queen's basement are definitely connected to the shelter and what's yet to come. If you're familiar with the Chapter 2 theory scene, you might remember Universal Mother Theory, which essentially posits that Queen represents each Lightner's relationship dynamic with their respective mothers. I think the dynamic Kris and Noelle have with their mothers in the new chapters add a lot of weight to that theory. With Queen being a little conniving and a bit controlling, I think it's clear she parallels the matriarch of Hometown, more so than she parallels any other mother. Carol's basement and Queen's basement are both tied to the shelter, and in turn, each other. I saw people on Twitter talking about the angel doll in the holiday house, lacking facial features, being a vessel for our soul, an angel, a workout-ready body fit for the heaven. and it got me thinking about Queen's boss fight. And I noticed some things on a recent playthrough that I hadn't yet connected. Queen, controlling this knight in glow-in-the-dark armor. Carol seemingly manipulating Kris, a knight with a soul that shines in the dark. Queen, filling up the battle box with liquid, changing the way that we have to fight her. She then attacks by using generally positive words, and eventually negative words flying at the soul. Hey, whoa, that's the purple soul, dude. This is then followed by a pseudo 3D segment with a strong resemblance to an existing work. Our thrash machine, our vessel, made up of 3 parts that we chose, allows us to interface with this opponent. Okay, so, nobody move. I'm not saying Carol will be the Andros. What I am saying is that there are some really strong connections between the Purple Soul, the Shelter, Queen's Basement, Carol's Basement, On-Rail Shooters, the Heavens, Pink and Gold, Piercing the Sky, Scars, Saving, Loading, the Green Guy, or Green Room Guy, off-screen, shattering the barrier as we dive into our darkest hour. The Eternal Night, growing beneath the earth. Kris, dropping bombs into the toilet. Toilet theory. Oh my god, an asteroid field of pink and gold. Dude, what happens when the internet goes out? With Queen, the internet won't connect, and her final attack fails to load. What could this mean? Who can we turn to for answers? Mr. Dink's Mr. Kattenheimer's genius daughter? Or perhaps we should look to our teacher. What does she fear will happen if the internet doesn't get fixed soon? Alfie's primal form. Green electric lizards, plugging in and making it big. Freedom, green with electricity. This room is just to the left of the lake, just to the left of the December holiday encounter, where we hear the song singing from the deep, waves crashing below, the eternal night growing beneath the earth, and this very green room is just to the left? I'm sorry, what's going on? Can anyone help me? I'm getting a little scared. All due respect to Gold Pro's roots theory, but I don't think this is bratty. In regards to Roots theory, I believe it is just 100% correct to say that the Roots dungeon is representative of Hometown. I like a lot of what Mr. Brick & Co. have to say in their theory, but this room in particular is just so juicy to me. I need to talk about it. First off, this, in my opinion, is where the Flower King's shop would be. There's flowers here, after all. Green lizards in video games, as a symbol, are never not directly associated with Kris's family. Growing up with Asriel, Kris's youth, when the family was together, showing us a window into how they all used to feel. How fitting for Asgore and his shop. The shape of this room is a plug face. Are we forgetting someone? The go-between who lets us play this game? I'm talking about Ram, and alluding to nobody else at all, obviously. Hey, guy who has the all-caps original game, what's up? Why is your face here, dude? You want to talk about that? How come you disappear in both the Sword Route and a Mantless run? If you don't belong in TV World, where do you belong? Is that why no one shed a tear for him in TV World? Because the Fallen Star will shed a tear for him in the Flower King Dark World? So he can get that second Werewire form? If that vast garden is going to be charred by the fiery inferno of Hell's Tail, wouldn't it make sense for a power strip to be involved? Flower King is not up to code, like the church. It does not have a fire extinguisher, the most important thing ever. The red object that has a 4-digit code on it, in the church. When we look at it, Kris starts to have a feeling, ... that Susie doesn't see this thing as significant in any way. And they're right. Anyways, if, heaven forbid, a fire were to break out at Flower King, all Asgore has are watering cans. If he has Alfie's over, sparks are definitely gonna fly. And if there's some electricity happening between them, and things go too far, will Asgore use the watering can and make everything worse? Am I even talking about watering cans in a literal sense? Or is there some kind of Dark World metaphor happening? Wait, what are we doing? Is this... Oh my god, it is. Dude, what the hell? This isn't a practical gameplay-focused discussion based on what we know. This is an extremely specific story prediction. Dude, you focused on the story and lore, and you got lost in the woods, and missed the forest for the trees. Why go there? What were you doing? Were you following something? Alright, enough beating around the bush with 2 stones to kill a single bluebird. This was a bit short-sighted. This theory doesn't have a neat bow on it. If I can talk to you from across the glass here, frankly, transparently, as much as I enjoy talking about gameplay intricacies, world design, and shilling for Nintendo, I also really love talking about the lore. But it was very important that I separated the gameplay-centered theorizing from this. Let's call it the friend zone, where I talk about Friend and how awesome it is. I love Friend. In my original conclusion before this interjection, I didn't mention Friend hardly at all. And that's because I was not getting deep into the lore. I won't be getting too deep now, but we have entered the friend zone of disclaimers and caveats. So let's wrap up really quick the so-called gameplay-centered analysis with some quick, easy, memorable, bite-sized, iconic, reductive, abbreviated pillars of sort out of which Astral Wolf finds its construction. Number 1. Connection through existing vectors of familiarity. Number 2. Trap mode's middling position in Undertale and strong parallels to Alfie's. Number 3. 3D illusions, going beyond dimensions, tails, circles, tails, and cycles. Number 4. Roots and shelter symbolism, locked away, pink and yellow on-rail shooters, friend. Number 5. Piercing the veil, simulations analogous to reality, reflected and echoed. Number 6. Checking the left, exploring every option, backtracking and retreading old ground. This theory is very open-ended. I don't know where this friend confrontation will take place. Possibly Chapter 5, but with all the Flower King premonitions, I don't know if we'll be going to the shelter that soon. My strongest argument, my most rock-solid evidence that Friend will get a 3D segment with a visual flair inspired by Star Fox and on-rail shooters is as follows. It would be awesome. Dude, the tail of hell up in the heavens, up in the stars, dodging and spinning, frantically chasing this mysterious manifestation of darkness that's just out of sight, that would be cool. I was joking about the asteroid field of pink and gold earlier, but it's somewhat related to a serious thing that I want to analyze. Just to be clear, we are out of the main theory now, and we're entering wild delusional speculation territory. Briefly. Anyways, let's look at this weird book in the Chapter 4 Egg Room. And so wept the fallen star, making rivers with its tears, and from the bitter water something grew. It looked like glass. Is the fallen star the night? It certainly feels that way, but what if this strange book has multiple meanings, like the prophecy panels? What is a fallen star, if not a meteor? With all the ways that growing darkness parallels fountains and water, could a river of darkness be like a linear hallway in space? Out of the darkness, something grows that looks like glass. Shadow crystals, right? Let's push a bit further here. Shadow crystals show us something beyond our usual perception. Something that looks so real, you can't believe it's not. So much so that Kris puts a crystal up to their ear when they see Noelle whispering on the other side. We, as the player, as we become more drawn into this world, as this world becomes more real, and the illusions of Flatland begin to grow, becoming 3D, we look through our monitor as if it was glass, as if it was a literal window. Pure crystal, the shadow purified by the cat. I think it's reasonable to assume that we would want to have all the shadow crystals before going into the shelter. I don't know what Sham is going to stitch for us, but whatever it is, I think it will be what allows us to interface with a layer of reality beyond the usual one. Something that would let us navigate the darkness. The two characters who are most aware of our Shadow Crystal mission are Sham and the voice in the Mantle game. I am a believer that the voice is friend. It communicates to us by going beyond the usual dimensions, layers of darkness, by using its awareness of the player's perception. This isn't some kid named Eram. This is some kind of darkness cat thing wearing the Shadow Mantle. Its boss arena slowly becomes more hellish, as it burns brightly like a fiery inferno. When it catches fire, it's followed by a segmented tail of flames. Notice how the little friendlings are summoned. They can appear anywhere on the screen, like Jevil could, appearing in multiples, but it seems like the boss has to drag itself over to each instance and bring it up from the depths, something within our dimension that can pull things from beyond our perception, like something that operates within the device layer. Friend is amalgamate shaped. It's unclear how many cats this thing constitutes. I think this endogeny image is largely symbolic. It's not the literal reveal of Friend's true form. Let's just spell it out. Kris has been in the shelter. The Knight has been in the shelter. Both Kris and the Knight have made dark fountains that allude to something pink and yellow, beyond the usual perception of reality, within the shelter. Friend is in the shelter. I'm saying it now, definitively. Confronting Friend in the shelter is when Astral Wolf theory takes place. Friend may appear in a Flower King Dark World. There may be some 3D illusions. There may be some more premonitions and symbolism regarding the shelter. But the penultimate confrontation that makes the world of Deltarune as real as ever, that makes our monitors look like glass, is in the shelter. Heaven, or something approximating heaven, is innately bound to the shelter. A battle-ready body that can pierce the heavens is there. The heaven-piercing battle is going to be a 3D on-rail shooter with Friend, like it just is. It's going to be awesome. I understand that this doesn't put a neat little bow on this theory. It's messy. It's more akin to duct tape on a shoebox. I don't think there's any neat way to wrap it up. Originally, my conclusion focused pretty heavily on the idea of resetting save files and treading back over them again, making a copy but coloring it in with care. There was a lot more to it than that, but it didn't really connect all that much to the Purple Soul mode, which is what this theory was supposedly about. And I guess Alphys is in there somewhere. Is she going to end up in the shelter? At the very least, I think Asgore will. I mean, trapped in asylum, locked within shelter. I mean, both of Alphys' love interests are in that underground labyrinth, so... Alright, that's it. I'm done. I'm cutting myself off. No more of that sweet, sweet freedom sauce before I lose my mind. If you've taken the time to watch this far, seriously, thank you so much. I hope you were able to learn something new, or take something fresh from all this. There's a lot more I have to say about this game, but honestly, I don't think I'll have time for another theory before Chapter 5's release. I'm actually in disbelief I was able to finish this one at all. It was a gargantuan undertaking, and I learned so much. I'd be honored if you shared this video with fellow Deltarune enthusiasts, left a comment telling me your thoughts, disagreements, and areas I can improve. That would be incredible. This is the first YouTube video I've published in over a decade. This really helped me fall in love with the medium again, so rest assured you will be hearing from me in the future. Probably with a big video after Chapter 5 drops, maybe something more off the cuff in the interim if there's time. If you enjoyed, consider using hype points to help spread it around the algorithm. These ideas have just been in my head and my head alone for months and months. It made me a little insane. I really very much want to know if other people think Astral Wolf theory has any validity at all. I'm really just hoping for some discussion here. This is a crack theory, I know that. I just want to see who'd smoke with me, you feel? That's it for this theory. This has been a Sqoya Videos production. The first one ever. I hope you liked it and subscribed. Yeah, that's good. I'll end it like that.